to another episode of Brainstorm Black. I'm your host, Charlotte Moore. This show is part of a larger project called the Black Bodies Project, which also consists of a film. The film Black Bodies has 16 black people who live in and around the Austin area talking about what it means to exist in the world in their black bodies. The film has been showing around Austin. It's shown at some film festivals. My guest today attended one of those screenings, and that's how I met him. After he saw the film, we met at Central Market and sat and talked about a wonderful idea he has about leveling the playing field when it comes to whites and blacks. On the show today is Mr. Jim Clark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Jim.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Of course. It was a pleasure meeting you. And which screening did you come to?
It was the one at George Washington Carver.
That's right.
So in September, October?
Yeah, it slipped my mind as I was doing that intro. I was like,
yeah,
where did
it was one of your first, I think.
Right.
At least in Austin.
Yeah, and then I was so pleased when I got the email and we decided to meet. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll talk about this idea you have that I think is profound for a number of reasons. But first, Jim, tell us just a little bit about who you are, where you're from, how long you've been in the Austin area.
Okay. I am relatively new to Austin. I moved about 5 years ago, actually next month, from Fort Collins, Colorado. And I moved here to be with Lynn, my now wife. I work as an engineer with the City Parks and Recreation Department, focused on resource efficiency and sustainability issues. But what we'll be talking about is not related to my work with the city. It's on the side as a nonprofit effort.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Austin. So I'm sorry. How long have you been here?
About 5 years.
What do you think of the city?
I've been impressed with it in a lot of respects. I love it like a lot of people do, especially the geography. I like the recreational opportunities.
Yeah, you're pretty active.
I am active. I try and be active. I like biking and hiking, so there's a lot of opportunities there. I've been, I think, most impressed with the people. Where I moved from in Colorado, there's kind of an attitude of you move there and you kind of want to shut the door, for any newcomers. But I was welcomed as a newcomer to the fastest growing city in the U.S. But I have really felt welcomed by people, and I have just in that 5 years established a lot of close relationships.
Very good. Well, welcome to Austin.
Thank you.
So when we talked, we met to talk about, in addition to the project that I'm doing, your idea for a nonprofit. First of all, I love the name that you have right now, which may change, but I'm going to let you just tell us about your idea, your nonprofit, and the name. I love the name.
Okay. Well, I'll start with that just so we have something to tag on to it. So it's a work in progress, but I needed something to call it rather than the project or the idea.
Right.
So the working title is Creating Authentic Racial Equity in Austin. So it may be a little bit contrived or forced, but CARE is the acronym. And I wanted to make it positive first instead of fighting against something like racism. I wanted to be positive. So in this case, creating an emphasis on the word authentic, because I think a lot of the reaction of white people is that, well, we already have laws that establish equality. But it's more about enforcement of that. It's about implicit bias. It's about equity, not just equality. So that's the primary emphasis. Maybe should I just kind of jump into how this all progressed?
And let me repeat that: creating authentic racial equity. I love that because that is a big problem, the equity issue. But just the acronym.
Yeah.
Is CARE.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing with a lot of these conversations within this issue is the CARE, like just at a very human, personal level. So I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And part of my history, maybe I'll just talk about my progression because it's different for every white, how you come to the issue. And I grew up in Kansas City, a suburb of Kansas City that was affluent, still is, pretty white, and at that time in the 60s and 70s it was quite segregated, both racially and economically, maybe even more so than Austin. So my only experiences growing up with blacks and black culture was in infrequent trips to inner city Kansas City, more for sporting events or for going to good barbecue restaurants, so just very limited. But I think the most profound experience I remember just in terms of racism was in 1965, so I would have been 10 years old, and I distinctly remember on our black and white TV seeing news coverage of the Selma to Montgomery walk and the confrontation in Selma between the sheriff and the police force and, you know, peaceful protesters and unleashing dogs and water cannons on people that were doing nothing other than demonstrating for their rights. And to a 10-year-old mind, you know, I just couldn't make sense of it. I distinctly remember being having a sense of injustice about it, but I didn't know what to do with that. And our family wasn't one to, you know, at the dinner table talk about a lot of issues, social issues or whatever. So whatever I did with it was just internal. And I continued living fairly isolated, not having many opportunities to meet black people, just in the path that I took in my life in the cities I lived in, Fort Collins, Colorado. But I tried to, as I got older, tried to intentionally put myself into more situations where I could be exposed to it, and not necessarily directly. Sometimes it was just spontaneous. For example, I volunteered in 2005 with the Red Cross for Hurricane Katrina relief work, and that was in Gulfport, Mississippi. So I'd guess we had 120 clients, as we called them, that were sheltered in an elementary school, and probably 80% of those were black. And it was my first experience to really get to know some black people at you know, a deep level, people that were, you know, in extreme situations, and feel for them and try to do something to assist them. Yeah. So that was impactful to me. And I knew at that point that I wanted to continue to work on projects that were more at that level of Maslow's hierarchy, you know, just the real critical needs. So that, and then jump forward to 2009 and 2010, I had the opportunity to do some, we'll call it humanitarian work with nonprofits in Tanzania and Uganda, a variety of projects. But I felt just really, I don't know, an affinity towards the African people that we were working with and serving, and just they were so happy and receptive, and just I felt just, I don't know how else to say it, an affinity towards that culture.
We should mention that with your proposed organization, it is there is a focus on black communities.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you say, I cut you off, but can you say more about, that's what strikes me, is you're a white man in America. You, at least from my perspective, you don't have to do any of this. You could go through life and live your life, and with the privilege that I believe comes with being a white man, you could just coast on that. But you're choosing to focus on these things, which I find admirable. I want to say that. Where does that come from?
It came from those experiences I was relating, and then most impactfully, last spring I just, for a variety of reasons, decided to immerse myself in this issue and to push myself to engage, to enrich my life with more, knowing that there were the opportunity for more blacks in Austin to reach out to them and to learn about it. So through that, a lot of reading, and then the opportunity came up to do the Undoing Racism training, the Beyond Diversity training, to see your showing of your film. The pivotal point for me was the Undoing Racism training that was in October. And I think it was just hearing the testimonies, the stories from the people of color, in particular the blacks, and just poignant, heart-wrenching stories of, you know, how it impacts lives. And you know, I guess I've just that both sensitivity to injustice and also just the problem solver in me, the let's do something about it, just motivated me to do whatever skills or abilities I have to to think about what could be done. So that's where this idea that we're going to talk about here came about. That was the seed, I think, that was planted for it.
And before we get into this a little bit more, can you try to explain to me what it's like? I don't know what it's like to be a white man and to be in your circles. Is it, and then I've worked with white people, of course, and spent time with them, but do you, in your personal life, do you see the disparity? Do you actually recognize the differences and the inequities?
That's one of those things that's hard to say, because I feel like I do, but I'm sure I'll never be to a point as a white that I could feel it as a person with a lived experience, right? There's just no way I can do that. But through this training, I feel like I'm more aware of the nuances to it, especially just those, even if unintentional sorts of things that just kind of are backdoor racism, just the small injustices that add up. I guess the answer is partially yes, and part of that also is the flip side of being more aware of the privileges that I have as being a white and a male and straight and just all those things. Just everywhere I walk, I have those privileges that I just take for granted, that you have to go through an exercise, I think, or have a close friendship with somebody that doesn't have those to really sense how privileged I am.
Well, like I said, I think it's, when I met with you, I thought about it a lot afterward, and just how for me, just generally, it's beautiful to get to know people who aren't like you. So I think it's great that you've taken it upon yourself to attend the workshops. They're there. Austin is rife with workshops and classes and information for people who want to, jump into this crazy complex issue. So
Absolutely.
Let's talk about creating authentic racial equity. Just give us the high-level idea that you have.
Yeah. So I think I approached it with my engineering side, I guess, kind of the logical problem-solving side. And after I came out of the Undoing Racism, I thought, well, that was exceptional training, but let's realistically, how many whites are you going to get to do a 2-day training? That's ideal, but it's not going to happen for everybody. So I started to think about what that leaves and how many people you need to reach. So I threw myself into the research, and I started thinking about, first I went back over the racial disparities in Austin specifically. So I wanted it to make it about Austin, not nationally. So, I found the statistics that I'm sure you and virtually all of your audience will know of, when you compare blacks to whites, of that black people are 2.5 times more likely to live in poverty, 2 times more likely to be unemployed, 9 times more likely to be homeless, 2 times, the one that really got to me, 2 times more likely to die as an infant. So to me, that's the issue, and more specifically, the need, from my perspective as a white, is, okay, how do you change that? You focus on the whites, because clearly the people of color get it, they understand the disparities and racism, so you need to focus on the whites. And then I started thinking about the numbers part after coming out of the Undoing Racism. I through the best estimates, maybe a couple thousand people, whites, are reached through all of those trainings. There's also the, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation circles that are out there. There's Undoing White Supremacy in Austin. So there's a number of groups out there, and they're doing all good things. But
I had no idea all these groups existed until I got into the space. And then Undoing White Supremacy, Undoing White Racism. It's people are doing work.
Yes.
But the numbers are not. The numbers are small.
The numbers are small, and then I started to think, well, how many does it take? And I attended the Mayor's Task Force. If you're not familiar with that, that was in 2017 that they came out with this report, an exhaustive report, like 200 action items. They had a breakfast meeting to update it a month ago, and there was some talk in the audience about, well, we're only through, and they specifically sponsored the Beyond Diversity training.
Right.
So they were talking about, well, we can reach every person out there, and 950,000 people in Austin. Come on, let's be realistic. So
right.
that's not going to happen. And so what number is it? And then so I started looking at, well, if we're just focusing on whites and white adults, there's I went through all the census data, like 360,000 adult whites in Austin. And then
I'm going to cut you off again.
Yeah.
You've done your research. You have a business plan that's how many pages? I think 8.
17 or 18.
Oh, okay. You've done your research, and it's I was reading through your business plan and was just blown away by all the information you've pulled together. So that's already a feat. So I wanted to mention that.
Thank you. The point is, I kind of filtered down from 950,000 people to 360,000 white adults to what's the tipping point. And I did some research on tipping points, and Malcolm Gladwell in 2000 wrote his famous book about tipping points. And there was some more recent research I found in Science Magazine last summer that came out that 25% through, it's not a precise number, but approximately 25%. So it's not 100%, it's not even 51% if you, for affecting social change, like racism, for making it a difference, you have to reach approximately 25%. So that's good, then we're a fourth of those 360,000, so we're to 90,000. Still a huge number, right? So I'm thinking, clearly it's something that in 2019, how do you reach tens of thousands of people? It's not going to be through 2-day trainings.
Right.
And so here's the idea in a nutshell, is using digital media, common thing obviously, and not that you're going to do everything with this. It's a first step. It's raising awareness. It's getting them halfway woke. And the people I can talk to about it wouldn't just be all whites, it'd be targeting more liberal whites, and there's particular challenges with liberal whites. I think it's recognized within the anti-racism community, is that there's almost like this self-righteous, and I should say attitude of, we got it, we're not racist. So what you have to crack is that there's a lot out there that you're not really aware of, and that I'm still learning. I'll always be learning. And to get into that, and what's your implicit bias, and most importantly, what can you do about it? Take action. It's not just out there, it's something you can take action on. So that's the focus. It's getting the whites, liberal whites, to raise their awareness enough that they'll attend these classes, that they'll donate money, that they'll take actions.
That's what I really find intriguing about it. I want to say that yes, so the city and others have these workshops, but if we're just relying on that, I totally agree with you that we can't reach. I think it's brilliant of you to say that you're focusing on speaking to your people, and because a lot of them don't really, I will say, and I'm speaking personally, the more I talk about race, the more you do tend to feel that you're speaking to deaf ears, or whatever that saying is. And you meet a lot of people who are like, I'm not racist. Or I know that, I already know that. And, so I love the idea of a white man or a group of white people looking at the situation themselves, and also trying to come up with ways to create a whole new paradigm around racism. So yeah, I think that's a really cool new way of looking at it that even goes beyond education. It's about a culture of people a culture of people who get each other, listening to one another, which is sometimes easier.
Yes, and that's where I think the bridge has to happen. That as a white, I feel like, even just looking at myself, I kind of know what the reactions are. Like you just said, the defensiveness of, I'm not an overt racist, but I'm part of a racist culture, and what does that mean, and what can I do about it? And
the system. That's a lot. People are talking a lot about that now too, and I think that's one of the main things it's making sense to me that we live in a system of racism, much like the fish in the water. He doesn't, tell everybody I'm swimming in water, but that's just his whole way of life, of living, of existing.
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm learning. Yeah, racism just is. And we're all affected by it. So we all need to kind of work together to figure this thing out.
Right.
Why focus on blacks? Why the focus on black people? You've mentioned it partly, but I want to talk a little bit about that.
I thought about that as opposed to people of color in general, and to me, I guess the simple answer is severalfold. First, you look at the statistics and there's no comparison. There's a clear distinction there, and there's no denying that there's horrible injustices against every other group of, every other race and cultural group that's non-white historically. But to me, it just seems more urgent with blacks, number one. Number two, I feel like there's other groups out there that are advocating for Latinos and for other people of color, and I support that. And then lastly, frankly, it would complicate it. It just, you kind of, there's different messages, there's different history, there's different approaches, and this is just one tool for one part of the problem.
Yeah, I've had that question too, and I think I did the Beyond Diversity training as well, and it was in there that he showed us the information about students, black students scoring the lowest on ACT and SAT, and a lot of critics will say that's poverty. It's a poverty issue. It's not a race issue. But even black kids from wealthy families were scoring lower than white kids from poor families. So it is a race issue.
It is.
We just need to crack the nut and figure out, understand why that's happening and do something about it.
Right.
So that's what has me really, I'm unapologetically focused on this black issue because I want to raise that. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And I applaud you for your efforts too, as you should, and I think it's going to take a lot of these kinds of things from both sides. So that's an example of, with this website, just to dive into that a little more if I could. Then, so a very robust, creative, interactive kind of website. We're not just talking about some static thing. So having story maps, if people aren't familiar with that, I encourage you to Google it. It's a relatively new technique of telling a story with video, with geographic information, with testimonials that is using all forms of media. That is very, very powerful. So that would be a key element. Doing the correct market research, so you're targeting the right group. And I talked about focusing on liberal whites, and I took that to another level of, okay, we had our recent election in last fall. There's pretty strong correlation, not surprisingly, between people that vote Democratic and at least an initial awareness of structural racism and acknowledgement that it's a problem that needs to be dealt with. And I understand there's a generalization, but so the focus would be on that target of people, let's say, that voted for Beto O'Rourke. So there were 150,000 approximately in Austin that voted for O'Rourke, and there were about 80,000 that voted for Cruz, and then 130,000 that didn't vote at all. So you focus on those 150,000, and we remember that number we had before of the 90,000. Somewhere there in there is that, let's acknowledge that some people are already there. So, but the point is, you do the marketing. There's a whole area called social marketing. It's kind of using commercial marketing techniques with affecting social change. So it's a science, it's social science. So you use those methods to know where these people shop, what their values are, what's important to them, and you target the media towards them. So that's the group, and you do it in ways that really reaches their minds and their hearts. That are testimonials from local black people of how something like what I experienced in Undoing Racism, just to hear the story from white people that have become more aware, and what's their story, how did that happen for them. Talking about videos, a summary of the history, not just nationally, but locally for racism, because if you don't know the history, it's just a personal issue. There's not racism. I'm not a racist. There's no history. It doesn't matter.
Right, no context.
No context. So you have to tell the story. So these are all the pieces that I would want to come together in just a powerful way for people to take action, and then
Yeah.
I can share what that means. To
Yes,
take action.
and I think Austin is a perfect place to do this. I love that it's hyper local because Austin, I think, is perfect ground for this kind of discussion because of what Austin says it is. It's really sort of testing that and looking at it. So yes, so action.
Yeah, but just to jump on that, just I think there's kind of that irony in some ways that we're this hip liberal city, right?
Yeah.
But we know what the history is like and what's
Right.
there, so I think you can kind of capitalize on that with the values and putting that in front of people's face, in effect that we're not what we say we are.
Right.
So the actions would be three things, three primary areas. So first, educating yourself more. You've been moved a little bit. Here are some links. Here are some resources. Some different steps you can take. Here are some groups, some trainings that you can attend to make a difference, to take it one step further. Second, you can take action in whatever power you have as a white, whatever privilege you have, whether it's at work, your social circles, your church, wherever you engage. When you see acts of subtle racism because of what's being hired, assumptions being made, take action, do something about it, raise your voice, take some action there. So just a strong encouragement about that and what it looks like. And then third, what I think was more of kind of an epiphany to me was while I was listening last fall to KUT fundraiser with NPR. So the analogy is that when you listen to National Public Radio, they can't control radio, right? So you can't do a membership and say you only can listen if you have a membership. It's there anyway. So their appeal is you're going to get it anyway, but almost like a guilt trip sort of thing, or think about what the value of that is to you, how many hours you listen, what you learn from it, entertainment, whatever. Yeah. Monetize that, put some value to it, and then contribute, do your part, right? Step up.
I love that because that works.
Yeah,
when I listen to
it works for me. It works for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? You want to contribute to what you support. Let's apply that to white privilege. So you've got white privilege. You live it every day. You'll have it. Whatever you do, you're going to stay white. You're going to have that privilege. Right. But give some thought to what that means to you. What does it mean to me that I got an interview easily because there wasn't some, black-sounding name to it or whatever the issue is? I have that privilege. So assign some dollar value to it and contribute. It's your dues for being white. Just think of it whatever works for you, and then that money goes towards vetted black local organizations that counter racism, that support your project, that support black dance projects, that support all kinds of things that I don't even know about that are happening in the black community that we, a majority group of blacks local tells us what makes sense. Where does that money go? So you have some local connection.
And there's so much. Again, since I've been in this space, I am learning there are so many black people in this city who are doing some amazing things you would never think of, like you said, in terms of, dance, education, just all sorts of things. So it's something like this would be amazing for a lot of those people who have the vision, they just don't have the resources and they don't know where to go.
Yeah. And it makes that connection between whites and something real, something tangible. And it's not going to solve the world. It's just, again, it's one piece of gradually moving these two masses together and having some more overlap.
I love that. We tend to check in with Chuka, who's our technical director, and I kind of want to I like getting a sense of, he's a little younger than me, and so I like asking him what he thinks about these various issues. And so Chuka, let's check in. You've been listening, what do you think of all this?
For me, I think that's a discussion that's come to the surface much more in recent times. This kind of turning the lens on whiteness, particularly in a city like Austin, which wears this liberal vest, quite proudly. But being here, but the experience of being here as someone who's non-white is quite different. So in a city like this, if that can become part of the culture, like that self-examination, I think, I think the community overall will benefit from it, like an understanding of what privileges there are, an understanding of the history of this place, and an understanding of the broader history of, larger history of the country. Those things will provide a path forward for everybody.
Nice, Jim. If Chuka likes it, it's a go.
Well, I will say that we need to get more black men involved too. I think I've seen, kind of a shortage of that in the racial, and for good reason. I think if I imagine myself as a black man, I'd be more hesitant to get involved.
Yeah, for a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. The premise, a lot of this show is about connecting the guests who come on with viewers who have resources, who have ideas that might match nicely with whatever it is this person's talking about. So I love to ask, is there anything you'd like to tell us that you need to get creating authentic racial equity up and going?
I think at this point it's just been all me. It's been kind of my vision, and I don't use that term lightly. It has, and there's times where it just felt like some of the ideas just kind of came out of the ethers to come together, but now it's in rough form. But I just feel like it's ready to be vetted. It's ready to be critiqued and see if it has legs or not. Just get it in front of the right people, and especially blacks, to see what does it need, what needs to be changed, if it's of any worth at all, and if so, make those changes, and then see about getting it funded. Just throw it out there, throw it against the wall, whatever other ideas. It just seems clear to me that the scale that we're talking about, we need some bold thinking and some different ideas. So my motivation is just get it out there, do my part, and if it fails, it fails. At least I feel like I did what I could, but I just wanted to get a hearing.
Yes. Well, we're not going to think about failure. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it is visionary. And so if you're listening, and if you're someone who wants to vet the business plan and talk with Jim about what he's trying to put together, is there a specific way they can get in touch with you? If not, they can contact us at blackbodiesproject.com, and we will make sure to get that information to you.
Yeah.
Unless you have a.
This is so informal. It's just me personally. It's not like a nonprofit group or a web page or anything of that sort. But so either that, or I'll just give my phone number if that's okay.
If you don't mind, sure.
No, my phone number 970-568-2461.
Okay, and
so just give me a call and we'll chat.
Okay. We'll make sure that's out there, and I commend you. First of all, I'm so pleased to have met you. I commend you for what you're doing. I think there's a lot of power in being a white man in America, but there's a lot of beauty and selflessness in what you're doing, and I want you to really hear that. I think it's great.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And the proof will be in my view. It's easy words, but I really want something to happen of it. So that's what we'll hope for.
Well, good luck, and we'll stay connected and let people know what works out with it. So thank you so much for being on Brainstorm Black. That is our show today, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for being here.